Hey everybody, this is Russ Metro Game Core. Let's review the Anbernic RG slide. I already did an impressions video on it about a week ago, but now the embargo is lifted so we can talk about things like performance, and we also know the final retail price. It's going to be $190 before shipping. And then also, like a lot of Anbernic launches, it'll be cheaper in the first few days of sale, so it's going to be down to $180 before shipping during that period. Now that is more expensive than I was hoping. I thought it would be closer to the price point of the other devices this company has released with the same chipset, so I was hoping around $160. It'll probably get there eventually with sales and whatnot, but we're going to take it at the face value of the retail price of $190. And so in this video, I'm going to talk about my week with the RG slide and all the good and bad that has come with it. And there are some moments that have been really awesome. I love this sliding mechanism and just the overall direction they've gone with this handheld, but I don't think it's a great fit for everyone. Either way, we got a lot to discuss here, so go ahead and grab a snack and drink. Let's go ahead and get started. Now, I want to start by talking about some of the things I've really enjoyed about the RG slide, and number one is this form factor and the sliding mechanism. It is really hard to describe just how satisfying of a snap this thing is when you close and open it. It's also very sturdy thanks to this metal frame on the back. It's quite loud when you close it, it's got a lot of force to it, but man, it is super satisfying and fun to use. You can also go into the settings and change how it behaves when you close and open it. So I have it set to go into sleep when I close it and then wake up when I open it back up. And for me, this setup has been an awesome experience because it feels like a true gaming handheld, especially when you have a front end like Emulation Station. This means that I can navigate through my different systems, pick a game, launch it and whatnot, but then when I'm done playing it, all I have to do is close it up and it will go to sleep. And I think that's just a really fun experience. The moment I'm ready to start playing again, I just have to open it back up and go right back to where I was. And the great thing is you can do this mid-game. So here we are with Golden Sun 2 on the Game Boy Advance. I can just close it up when I'm done playing. When I'm ready to start playing again, I can just jump right back into it. So it's a wonderful experience. It's got a very old school vibe to it, and I think the 4:3 aspect ratio is a good fit in that regard. In fact, one of my favorite things to do over the past week has been to find 4:3 content videos on YouTube and then just play them on this thing and kind of treat it like an old school video player. This has been really fun. One thing of note, in the box it'll come with a screen protector that is perfectly form-fitting for this case, and I absolutely recommend that you use it because when you're sliding this in and out of your pocket, that screen is going to be exposed, and so adding that one layer of protection with the tempered glass screen protector is a really big lifesaver. It also sits nearly flush with the shell, so it only barely sticks out, and so I think it's a good addition here, and you can still use your menu buttons just fine. And so far and away, the form factor and the sliding mechanism and the 4:3 screen have been an excellent fit for me. I've really enjoyed using this over the past week. However, one of the big things to understand about this device is just how big and bulky it is, because it is really hard to convey in a video. In my impressions video, I showed off a bunch of size comparisons and also talked about the fact that it is a lot heavier than other handhelds in this similar size, but even then, it's still just comically large. Every time I pull it out of my bag, I'm like, holy crap, I forgot how big this thing is. It's really bulky. The way I've been thinking about it is that it has a mid-2000s bulk to it, which goes in line with the mid-2000s sort of style to it. And even though it looks kind of like a PSP Go, it is nothing like it in terms of just overall pocketability and size. So if you're looking for a PSP Go in the modern era, this is not it. Instead, I would liken it more to a mid-2000s cell phone that had a sliding mechanism to it, like the T-Mobile Sidekick. Now, by virtue of having a larger device, there are some benefits to it. Number one is the fact that this has full-size controls, at least for a handheld. And so instead of your typical flat or clicky buttons and D-pad, we actually have the standard Anbernic size right here. So these rubber membrane, and they all feel really good. The analog sticks are a little bit on the small side, but they are capacitive sticks, which mean they are super accurate and also don't have any sort of electromagnetic interference by being magnetic. And I will say that over my week of playing with this, since making my impressions video, I've come to enjoy these controls even more. The device still feels top heavy and a little bit imbalanced because we got so much glass as well as metal up here up top, but I have gotten used to it. One of the things that helps because of this bulky size is that we have space for our entire index finger up here, which allows you to balance the rest of the weight up here with your index fingers. And so I will say that my overall feelings when it comes to ergonomics and controls have gotten better over the past week. It's not a perfect handheld experience. I think that the controls themselves sit a little bit low, which can be crampy over time, especially with the D-pad and face buttons. But for just pick up and play gameplay, I've been enjoying it a lot. Another benefit of a bulkier device is that it allows the heat to dissipate a little bit more easily because there's some more space for it. There is also active cooling, which allows it to cool down the device, and so I found this to not get super hot. Now, don't get me wrong, it still gets a little bit warm, but not to the point where I would find it unpleasant. It's just more noticeable than anything. So when it comes down to it, there is a trade-off between having bigger buttons and a roomier control scheme, and then also just the overall size of the device. It is a little bit big. And so kind of my big takeaway with this is that if you can get over this size where it doesn't look like egregiously large to you, then you probably will really enjoy this device. I know a lot of other reviewers think it's just fine in terms of overall bulk, but I did want to warn you that it's a lot bigger than you may expect. Now, the final other benefit of having a larger device is that they have space for a larger display. This thing is 4.7 inches, 4:3 aspect ratio, with a resolution of 1280 by 960 and a refresh rate of 120 Hz. Those are specs that we often do not see in these retro handhelds, and I think it's a big leap forward when it comes to playing retro game content. Now, this is an LCD panel, and it's one of those that you can definitely tell that it's not OLED, because it does lack some contrast and richness compared to other screens that we can find at this price point. And so the way I've been thinking about this screen is that it's also a bit of a trade-off. It is beautiful, it's large, it's got a nice resolution to it, but it also lacks a little bit of that contrast, especially when it comes to those deeper blacks. But when you put it all together, I still think it is a very good screen. Now, there are two main benefits of this screen. Let's talk about the refresh rate first, then we'll talk about the resolution. Now, because this is 120 Hz, that means we can use special tricks like sub-shaders as well as BFI or black frame insertion. Now, unfortunately, there seems to be something with these shader subframes that isn't working properly. You can probably see there's like a moving black line right here. And unfortunately, I have not been able to fix this. And so even though this is supposed to work with a 120 Hz screen, I haven't been able to get it to work properly here in Android. And so instead, the other option that we have is black frame insertion, which I talked about in my last video. Now, this essentially will put a black frame in between every other frame with a 120 Hz display, which allows you to have much better motion clarity as you're playing a game. It's something that's really hard to convey in a video, but for me, it looks more like an original CRT, especially when using a CRT shader in combination. And so this gives a really cool retro vibe when you're playing your game. But like I mentioned in that other video, you have to turn up the brightness quite a bit to be able to get this to work because those black frames that you are inserting will darken the screen overall. And so in order to get this to look proper here, you have to really crank up the brightness. You can see I'm playing it at about 90% brightness right here, and it's going to work fine when you're playing in a game. But like I showed in that other video, when you exit out of a game, it makes it super bright because it's now at 90% brightness. And so I have found this to be a little bit jarring than having to go back and forth and adjust the brightness when I'm in and out of a game. So really over the course of the past week, I've actually turned off black frame insertion so that I can just play games at their typical like 50% brightness instead, and it makes it a lot more natural when I'm playing a game, I exit out of it, and then all the brightness is still going to be the same. However, there are still some benefits to having a 120 Hz display besides just the motion clarity. One of the big things is that it actually reduces input latency. And so even if you're not going to use special features like black frame insertion, it might be worth it to use the 120 Hz refresh rate just because it allows you to have a little bit reduced input latency. Another great benefit of this screen is that it's a 960p resolution, which means it's going to be a 2x integer scale for a lot of classic systems like Dreamcast, PS1, Sega Saturn, and Nintendo 64. And so what you can do is go into the settings here and upscale them to match the 960p resolution, and it's going to look super crisp and clear. And for me, this is where the RG slide really shines. When you can upscale it up to a 960p resolution, it fills out the entire 4:3, and you can take advantage of that entire 4.7 inches. And honestly, even playing 16:9 content like PSP or even some lightweight Nintendo Switch still looks really good on this screen. It's going to be 4.3 inches. In other words, even though I don't think the RG slide was designed particularly to play 16:9 content, it still looks big enough for me. I'm also very excited to see other devices from Anbernic use this screen, so I hope they continue to use it in the future. Now, one other unexpectedly fun aspect of this device has to do with that larger screen again, but when you close it up so that you're hiding the controls, I found it to kind of be like this really quirky and somewhat small tablet. It obviously cannot hold a candle to something like an iPad mini, but it's also kind of hilarious to be able to use it like a really bulky tablet to play touchscreen games. And so even very simple match 3 puzzle games have been a lot of fun on this tablet, definitely not something that I expected when I first heard about it. Now, the thing about the embargo that was put on us was that they didn't want us showing any sort of performance specs, which was kind of silly considering the fact that Anbernic has released 4 different devices with the exact same chip. But let's show you what high-end performance looks like. I think it really only comes down to 4 major systems. Everything underneath that, all the way up to like Nintendo 64 and Dreamcast, are going to be fine. But let's talk about these 4. We'll start with PlayStation Portable. Now, this screen is going to work best at a 3x resolution. That's going to scale perfectly, and almost every single PSP game will play at that resolution no problem. The only exceptions are going to be the really hard to play games like God of War. These ones are going to require you to downscale to a 2x resolution instead. I think it still looks very good, but something to be mindful of. Another system that's a challenge to emulate is going to be Sega Saturn. I found I got the best results by using the Yabasanshiro core within RetroArch. This core is more performance-minded and is not the most accurate core, but it plays almost every single game at full speed, including challenging games like Sega Rally Championship. So as long as you're willing to play with the Yabasanshiro core, I would say that yes, Sega Saturn is pretty easy to play here. Another system that runs well on this chipset is Nintendo GameCube. For the most part, I just set it to the Vulkan backend, a 2x resolution upscale, and almost every single game plays really well. And GameCube might be one of my favorite systems to play on the RG Slide because so many of these play really well, and that 2x resolution upscale looks amazing on this 4.7-inch screen. Now bear in mind that this is also getting very close to the limit of what this chipset can handle, and so when you get to the higher end games like F-Zero GX, you will have to do a little bit of a workaround. For example, with this game, I chose to use the PAL version of it. That means it caps out at a 50 Hz refresh rate, which is going to be a little bit easier for the chipset to reach. And then on top of that, I had to reduce it down to a 1x or a native resolution to get it to play at full speed. But I would still say this game is relatively playable. So long story short, I wouldn't say that you can play every single GameCube game on this. There are probably going to be some problematic games, but for the most part, the majority will play at a 2x resolution, and then some others you will have to make some tweaks with. It's also a similar story with Nintendo Wii, although this one's a little bit harder to run, and so I found that for the most part I can play most games at a 1x resolution instead of 2. Also be sure to go into the Dolphin Wii settings and set it to 4:3 instead of the default 16:9 so that you can fill up the whole screen. I think it's going to look a lot better. Now unfortunately the experience is not the same when it comes to PlayStation 2. This one is a lot harder to get running. By default, I set everything to the Vulkan backend and then also just a 1x or native resolution just because very few games would play at a 2x resolution. And even then, just setting those simple toggles is often not enough, so you will have to resort to 50 Hz PAL games if they're available, but then also you may have to do some underclocking as well. And even then, some of the harder to run games like Burnout Revenge or even God of War 2 are not going to play at full speed. So one thing to bear in mind here is that I would definitely not consider buying this specifically for PS2. Instead, I would treat this system as an added bonus, where yes, you can play up through GameCube with relatively good performance, but once you get to PS2, you're going to have to be a lot more choosy. And for me personally, I don't really like using underclocking when playing PS2, just because it starts to feel like the timing is a little bit off, and if I'm going to be playing a PS2 game, I've waited all these years to play them on a handheld, I would rather play that on something that runs a little bit better out of the box. So personally, I don't really see myself playing a lot of PS2 games on the RG Slide, except for the few that work really well. Another thing worth bearing in mind is that when playing at a 1x resolution, the graphics themselves look a little bit chunky, especially with PS2, and so it's not that great of an experience, especially with a 4.7 screen, because that chunkiness is just even more apparent. Okay, now let's talk about battery life. Let's start with a worst case scenario and then talk about a best case scenario and then something in between. So worst case scenario for me would be playing PlayStation 2 because that really pushes the system. And so here with Jak and Daxter running with a mild underclock and a 60 Hz refresh rate, and then playing it in the performance or high mode within the Anbernic settings at 50% brightness, I found that I got 4 hours and 44 minutes of gameplay. And honestly, that's not bad when it comes to PS2 with an Android-based device. And so, yeah, I'm pretty impressed that this is the worst case scenario when playing PS2. Now for our best case scenario, that's playing Super Punch-Out on the Super Nintendo, again with a 60Hz refresh rate and a 50% brightness, and using the Z-Fast CRT shader. And so this is just your typical retro gaming experience, and I got 11 hours and 7 minutes with this setup. And again, that's an excellent amount of gameplay time, so I'm really happy with that. And then finally, we've got a middle ground here. So this is again playing Super Nintendo with Super Mario World 2, but this time I turned on 120Hz refresh rate. I also turned on black frame insertion and used that CRT shader. Now, in order to get this to look as good as it did with the other systems at 50% brightness, I had to crank up the brightness to 90%. And between the higher refresh rate and brightness, that does come at a cost. So instead of getting 11 hours with the typical Super Nintendo setup, this was only 6 hours and 40 minutes. Again, I still think that's a good amount of time when it comes to playing retro games, and so in general, I'm pretty happy with this battery life altogether. It's also worth noting that this thing is really good when it comes to standby time. So for example, if you're just playing it, you're done playing, and you want to close it up, you can just kind of leave it like that. And I left it overnight last night, and it was about 9, maybe 10 hours. And when I came back, it was still at the exact same percentage of battery as when I had left it. So I had a 0% battery loss over the course of 9 to 10 hours. And I think that's another win for this device in the fact that you can kind of treat it like a gaming handheld, where you can just leave it in standby when you're not using it. The battery will slowly drain, but not that much. And then when you're ready to play it, you just open it up and you're ready to go. And there are a lot of Android devices that don't give you that same kind of seamless feeling. And so I really do enjoy that on the RG Slide. Now, there are a lot of things that I think Anbernic got right with the RG Slide, but it could be a little bit better. So I have a couple things that I just kind of want to nitpick here at the end. So number one, even though I really do like this form factor, I'm not sure it's the ideal screen for this specific handheld. The fact that we have a 4.7-inch display does make this device quite large, and so that's one of those things where if they had used a smaller screen, it might have been a better fit. For example, here's a 4-inch display from the RG406H, exact same chipset as this one here, and I feel like this would have made the device overall a little bit smaller and more pocketable. I also think that a 16:9 aspect ratio screen might have been a little bit better because it would have made the device not quite so tall. And that aspect ratio would be a perfect fit for PSP, which would really go towards making this feel more like a PSP Go. Now, don't get me wrong, I think this screen is still great, and overall, it's a really fun and comfortable size, but another thing I would have liked too is if this screen had been centered here vertically. You can see this bezel is wider than the one on the right, and when playing vertical games like this, it does get a little bit weird. One other thing that would have been really cool, or maybe something we can see in a version 2, would be a SIM card slot, because I think that a lot of people would love to use something like this as an actual phone. If you combine that with a 16:9 aspect ratio and maybe a little bit smaller form factor, I could see this being a really fun hybrid hit. One other thing I would have loved to have seen improved with the RG Slide is the fact that with this chipset, I haven't seen Anbernic release a device that can give you video out and charge at the same time. There are only a few adapters that will actually work with the device, which is kind of challenging on its own, and I have not found a dock or a hub that will charge it at the same time when giving it video out. Now, I don't think that's the end of the world. I love the fact that you do have video out with this device in the first place, but it is a little bit wonky. Another thing to keep in mind is that out of the box, it's going to give you a 4:3 projection on your display, which actually is going to work out pretty well if you're playing 4:3 content, but when playing 16:9, there are a couple extra steps. When you have it plugged in, you'll want to go into the top-down menu and select wired projection, and then set it, instead of being at handheld game console mode, into desktop mode. That'll provide you with a 2-screen setup, and on that second screen, you can now play your 16:9 content. So there are workarounds to be able to play this either in 4:3 or 16:9, but it's not a seamless experience. And again, I wish I could charge at the same time as well to truly make this feel like a console. So putting this all together, you're probably wondering whether or not I even recommend this device in the first place. There's a lot of thoughts here. Number one is the fact that this is a very charming form factor. I can't get over how fun it is to slide this thing up and to use it like a gaming console. It's not the most comfortable thing in the world, and it also has a few shortcomings in terms of ergonomics by virtue of having this sliding form factor. So I can totally see why there are going to be people who find this thing to be totally bulky and ridiculous, but there are going to be people also who absolutely love it. And I will say that over the past week or so, it's been growing on me more and more, to the point where I'm almost ready to say that I love it. The big thing that holds me back is that price point. I think that $190 retail plus shipping is a lot to ask for a chipset that can't even really play PS2 very well. And if that is a system you were looking forward to play on the RG Slide, I'm here to say that the experience may not be as good as you're hoping. In the end, this is the device that really shines when it comes to playing retro gaming as well as some of those early 3D classics. You know, Nintendo 64, Dreamcast, PlayStation, all those play really well too. But whether or not that experience is worth $200 is really going to come down to how much you absolutely love this form factor. And for me, I can see this really being an excellent $150 or $160, but $200 to me is a little bit much. So in a world where we've got a ton of different handhelds that look very same, I find this one to be very big and bold, and it just stands out from the pack, and I really do appreciate that. I think that Anbernic really shines when they change it up and they try something new, and this is a really good example of that. So in the end, if you watched my 2 videos about this handheld and you like everything that you saw, then I think that you probably will actually enjoy using the RG Slide. For everybody else, I would maybe wait for a sale or see if there's going to be a version 2 of this in the future. I feel like if Anbernic got so many things right with this first generation, then the second generation might be even better and might be worth waiting for. Either way, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Are you thinking about picking up the RG Slide, or are you going to be waiting for something else? As always, thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if you found this helpful, and we will see you next time. Happy gaming.